Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning into the Ground and Pound cast. We are one night after watching UFC Fight Night, Strickland versus Hernandez. Had a lot of pretty fun fights to watch for a fight night. And of course, you had a really exciting main event. I am joined with the soothsayer of the MMA world, Nostradamus. Rick couldn't make it tonight, but I have some of his thoughts saved on the main card. But first, Roy, tell everybody hi and tell us what you think about this main event.
Welcome, everybody, to the Ground and Pound cast. I am excited to talk about this card. Hearts were broken, dreams were crushed, records were set, and other things happened that were just as incredible.
Absolutely. So, Roy, let's go ahead and talk about this main event. Sean Strickland versus Fluffy Hernandez. Talk about how it played out, the end result, what you thought about the lead up to everything and the fallout from this fight.
This may have been the best Sean Strickland that we've ever seen, next to his win over Adesanya. And I only think the Adesanya win is bigger because it was a bigger win. I mean, that got him a belt. Sean, this time, was more on his back foot, fighting well than I've ever seen him in the past. It was a lot of the jab and teep that we're used to, except for he used that lateral movement to stay out of Fluffy's range and continuously land that jab almost at will. Fluffy never got to a point of desperation in the fight like he has with his last 6 or so bouts, where he felt the need to rely on his wrestling. And he felt the whole time that he could stand and bang with Sean right up until he couldn't.
Yeah, so basically I saw it the same way. The striking, it wasn't very one-sided in the first 2 rounds. It was pretty close with Strickland just kind of edging him out a little bit. The big takeaway that I saw in just the striking exchanges, just talking about that part, was Sean did a really good job with his defense. Like, he wasn't throwing tons of volume. He was just kind of sticking and moving a little bit. But whenever Fluffy was ready to throw his punches and kicks, mostly punches, Sean was just ready to block everything and then circle out, and then he would return with a couple of shots of his own. It was nothing too exciting. It was kind of a medium-pace exchange. It seemed like Fluffy was just having a really hard time getting in that pocket, getting in that sweet spot to start landing what he wanted to land. He would land mostly glancing blows because Sean was just really good with the movement and blocking things, where most of the blows were just glancing blows. And anytime, you mentioned the grappling a little bit, like he didn't get to that desperation moment where he really wanted to shoot. I think what was happening there was he just wasn't able to, because in the few times that they did have a grappling exchange, more of a standing clinching part of the fight, it would be a moment there that Fluffy would be able to start to set up a takedown, but every single time he would get the clinch, get Sean up against the fence, Sean would very, very quickly get an underhook. And if you know anything about grappling, you get an underhook on somebody, you shut down their ability to change levels. So he just wasn't able to secure Sean in a good enough position to try to take it to the mat. So Sean would get the underhook, and they would kind of jock for position a little bit. Sean would circle out, push away, and then go right back to the boxing, and just kind of repeated that.
Yeah, Sean definitely was moving better this fight and controlling the pace well. We always like to talk about what comes next for the winner. And I know that Sean called out Hamzat, but I think before you give him Hamzat, he's got a couple losses to get retribution against DDP for.
Yeah, I mean, he's already 0-2 against him. It's one of those weird situations where it's what some people like to call rotating title syndrome. So the person beats you that you probably won't be able to beat, eventually lose the title. Sometimes styles make fights. I don't know if it's exactly going to play out that way, but basically what I'm getting at is when you look at matchmakers, I don't know if they're going to want to force him to have that third fight. If it was only one loss and then that was it against DDP, that would be one thing. But the fact he's 0-2, I don't know if they're going to do that. The big talk I'm seeing online is, should he A, fight Khamzat Chimaev? Should he just immediately get that title shot off of this win? Or should he B, have a rematch against Imavov? He's already beaten Imavov, but Imavov has since looked really good and has worked his way up to basically number one contender status. And then C, another one I'm seeing a lot of people say, and I really don't understand this one. This would be the last of my picks of these three. But I'm also seeing a lot of people saying, you know, maybe we should see a rematch against Adesanya. Again, another person he's beat. I don't really think that is the move to make because Adesanya has fallen a lot down the rankings lately where Imavov hasn't. So if you are going to do one of the rematches against people he's already beaten, it would make more sense for Imavov. Maybe have one of those two fight. Winner faces Chimaev. You mentioned DDP, and I do think that is a good name to bring up when it comes to possible future matches for Sean Strickland. That's not one of the names that I'm seeing being mentioned, but that doesn't mean that's not the route they're going to go.
The scuttlebutt I've been hearing is that Alex Pereira is going to move up to fight against Cyril Gane at heavyweight, and Khamzat's going to move up to fight against Jiri at light heavyweight, which would leave basically DDP versus Sean for the title at middleweight.
Yeah, I don't know about the Chimaev moving up things. That's been kind of a very loose rumor. I haven't really seen. You can
never trust scuttlebutt, but it's always fun.
Yeah. Now here's what the big question is, though. If it comes down to option D, and that is DDP against Sean Strickland Part 3, do we think Sean could win? Now, I want to say real quick, UFC fans, or I'd say people in general, but especially UFC fans, are really bad with recency bias. If you're coming off a loss, you're just the worst thing ever. You're never that good. You're washed. If you have one good win, then you're just next in line for the title. People get a little too sensationalized based off of one loss or one win. All that being said, him against DDP, if that happens, I really wonder if he could win that one. He is 0-2. I still argue that he should have won. I've said it multiple times in the podcast. I think he should have won that first fight. It was close, but I had it, and I've rewatched the fight. I had it 3 rounds to 2 rounds for Sean. He was 0-5 in rounds in the rematch. He got completely destroyed in the second one. So I'm not quite sure if he gets it done. I don't know. What do you think? If that fight happens, do you think he could beat DDP in a third attempt?
I think DDP is the hill that he has to climb before he gets on the mountain that's Khamzat. After what Khamzat did to DDP, I really feel like Sean doesn't stand a chance against him if he can't at least climb the hill that's DDP.
Yeah, I mean, I get where you're coming from, but it's not necessarily going to play out that way because styles do make fights. And the way I look at it, in their first fight, the one where I think Sean should have won but didn't, a lot of that came down to the takedowns from Dricus du Plessis, and he did land some takedowns, but he couldn't keep him down. Sean Strickland has one of the lowest rates for time on bottom position in the division. So he is not an easy person to take down at all. And if you do take him down, he's even harder to keep down. Whereas Dricus showed he has pretty good takedown offense, but we haven't really seen his takedown defense and his ability to get back up when he's put on his back put to the test until he fought Chimaev. I think that in that area of his game, I think Sean might be better. So I think it is possible Sean Strickland does give a better showing against Chimaev than DDP would just because of the styles, but that doesn't make me believe that he for sure will beat him. Once upon a time, I did believe that Sean Strickland would beat Khamzat Chimaev. I actually talked about it at great length. This was right after he beat Israel Adesanya, and there's a lot of people talking about how people that train with Sean know that he has a really good grappling game. He just doesn't really use it. And at the time, Chimaev's last fight was against Kamaru Usman, where he looked good for 2 rounds, then he really slowed down the 3rd round, lost that 3rd round. A lot of people were saying if it had been a 5-round fight, who knows, Usman could have probably come back and won that fight. So whenever I look at those 2 fights and look at how good how good Sean Strickland looked against Adesanya and looked how Chimaev kind of barely got past Usman, I was like, man, if those 2 fought, Sean would kill him. But seeing what Chimaev's done since then against Dricus du Plessis, and also looking at some of his sparring footage against Sarukian and Luke Rockhold. Luke Rockhold is a very large guy, a former light heavyweight champion. Or no, I'm sorry, he's a former middleweight champion, but he's also a former light heavyweight. He's fought a light heavyweight. Man, I don't know. Chimaev's grappling is very special. So I don't know. It would really be fun to watch. I hope we eventually get to see it. But I don't think that Sean necessarily needs to prove he could beat DDP just to beat Chimaev. But
I always forget that Sean is a former champion and deserves the respect of a former champion. There's something about Sean that just screams, I've never accomplished my goals in life. And I let that get in my way of the respect that he's earned.
Yeah, and a lot of it comes down to recency bias. And this is actually, I really want to go on a big rant about this. I don't want to take too long on it, but one thing that really bugs me about the MMA fans, not the ground and pound cast fans, because we have the best of the MMA fans, but a lot of other fans out there are really, really bad about recency bias. I said it earlier. So whenever this fight was coming up, Sean Strickland, he was coming off a loss against DDP. He had a okay-ish performance against Paulo Costa, so he hasn't looked super impressive, whereas Fluffy was on this really long winning streak. And leading up to the fight, there was so much talk online about how people are crazy for thinking that Sean Strickland could win this match. Everybody was talking about how Fluffy's going to destroy him and make it look easy. Sean is not even in this dude's league. And I'm like, dude, this guy's a former champion who's beaten some very, very big names. His only recent losses were against Dricus du Plessis, who's beaten everybody he's ever faced in the UFC, minus Chimaev. Put some respect on his name, but there was so much talk, so much hype behind Fluffy that he was just the next big thing. Sean doesn't have a chance. Then the fight happened, Sean won, and all these same people are like, man, Fluffy wasn't even that good. He was hyped up too quickly, and they quickly turned on him. And then I see also these same people saying, oh, Sean would definitely beat Chimaev. So you go from saying Sean has no chance against Fluffy and Fluffy's the next big thing to Fluffy was never that good. He was hyped up too quickly and Sean would decimate Chimaev. I can't get over how ridiculous the recency bias is and how fickle the fans are in the MMA online community. It kind of drives me insane. And the middleweight title picture is really bad for that, because you have people at the very top who they win big and they lose big a lot. I mean, you look at Adesanya's rise and fall, DDP's wins and losses recently, Imavov and Sean Strickland in the middle of all of this. I'm seeing a ton of it, and it really drives me crazy. But that has really affected a lot of the talk surrounding this title picture and Sean Strickland and Chimaev. It's just very bad short-sightedness and recency bias. And it's just absolutely killing me. I really wish MMA fans would be a lot smarter than they are.
See, I knew that if it stayed a boxing match, kickboxing match, that Sean was going to win it. I just expected at a certain point Fluffy was going to dedicate to his wrestling and be able to overtake Sean. Unfortunately, every time that Fluffy went after anything grappling related, he left himself open for underhooks and wasn't able to maximize what he was trying to do.
Man, I'm telling you, as someone who does jiu-jitsu, the underhook, and anytime you get in an entanglement, the person with the underhook is usually the one that's at the advantage. Now, if it's a standing position where you both have one underhook, it's kind of neutralized, but you at least stifle the other person's ability to get a takedown. So because it was just one underhook each on each other. If Sean chose to try to change levels, he also wouldn't be able to, but that wasn't his goal. The underhook is a very powerful tool, and people who don't really understand grappling don't really understand that. Like, I kind of compare when it comes to an entanglement, the grappling is equivalent of a jab in boxing. It's not like this big, powerful thing that you look at and think that it's this big game changer. It's one of the smaller moves that you see that you, if you're not kind of privy to the game that they play, you don't realize how much that gives you the control of the overall exchanges and the overall match. So like with the boxer, and again with this same fight we're talking about, Sean Strickland establishing the jab, a lot of it came down to how well he was able to utilize his jab. Whenever it came to the entanglements, he was also able to get those underhooks, and that's really all he needed. So he was able to get the underhooks to keep it standing. He was able to establish a jab so he can dictate the pace and then just eventually wear him down. There's another channel I follow. I can't remember which one it was. Another MMA channel who was talking about Fluffy and how good he is, but pointed out that one of the weaknesses he has is he allows himself to get hit in the body. When he does, he gets hurt. He still has won those fights when he got hurt, but the fact was he still got hurt. And this channel pointed out that Sean could exploit that. And that's actually what happened in the third round. He ended up catching a knee up the middle, crumpled him, and went with the finish. But it all led up to that with establishing the jab. The people talk about the teeps. I don't think the teeps played as much of a role as the jabs and the underhooks did in the grappling defensive exchanges. So, there's a little more news to talk about when it comes to this fight. So in the press conference, we all know how Sean Strickland is the most unfiltered person in the MMA world.
Should we really give what his nonsense airtime?
I mean, we don't need to necessarily break down what he said. I mean, unless you want to, it doesn't really matter to me. I don't really care. But I just thought it was kind of funny that it's kind of clear that the brass behind Paramount are a little more like they're a lot more PC. They're politically correct more than ESPN is, because whenever Sean decided to go on one of his usual rants like he always does, all of a sudden they cut off his mic and they cut off the feed to the audio and everything. It wasn't just his mic, and he did confirm that. Some people were wondering if it was like a technical glitch or something, but he came out the next day on social media talking about, yeah, they cut off my mic. So
yeah, Sean likes to get a little out of the box, and you got to wonder how far are we going to let these guys run with their mouths? But on the other hand, do we really want Paramount controlling what kind of hype these guys put behind their fights? So I'm torn on this one.
Well, how I look at it, man, this is the fight game. This is UFC. We're watching guys beat each other up. People are getting bloodied, and it's not fictional like a movie. This is raw, and you have a bunch of raw people that are involved with this kind of stuff. If they allow F-bombs and the post-fight, speech, just let fighters be who they're gonna be. It's gonna happen whether you like it or not. Paramount should have known this getting into a deal with UFC, but there's nothing we could do about it. I say just let them talk, and if people don't like it, then you can either like the person or hate the person for it. How I look at it, it could kind of be a self-regulating thing. If someone talks enough stuff and maybe ruffles enough feathers and has enough negative fan reaction to it or a negative public reaction to it, they might adjust course on their own. It actually kind of happened with this here because, leading up to the fight, Sean went on some unfiltered rants and flipping off the crowd and all kinds of stuff. And it actually got to the point where Fluffy Hernandez was talking to Sean after the fight saying, my daughter thinks that you hate Mexicans and thought that when you're flipping off the crowd, you're flipping her off. And she's really upset about that. And Sean actually responded that that's not what he meant by that. And he actually sincerely apologizes that he did feel bad about that. So Sean is not quite as evil as some people like to make him out to be. He is unfiltered and does have some very rough views on a lot of things. Some I agree with, some I don't. And that's fine. But I think at the end of the day, he's not like a malicious person. So that's an example there. Like, he talked a lot of stuff and a lot of it he didn't regret. He doubled down on it. But then when he found out that he did hurt a little girl's feelings, he's like, okay, I wasn't trying to go that far. Let her know I'm sorry. I don't feel that way. We're cool. You're a good guy. You're a good dad. Best wish to your daughter. And that's that.
The way I look at it, I don't think anyone's looking to prize fighters for the next big insight into the world, but it's not surprising for them to voice their opinions either. They're going to do it whether it's on Paramount or on YouTube. We may as well just let them get away with it.
Yeah. All right, so I guess we could go ahead and move on to the next fight. A fight I was very wrong on. I mean, we haven't really talked about the scores that we got on our predictions. This was a very hard card to do predictions for because the matchmaking was so tight. But I ended up coming out. Main card was a total of 6 fights. I had 2 correct and 4 wrong, and I think this one I was the most wrong on because I looked at this guy, Medish. I heard you say Medish last week. I heard other people in the event saying Medish.
Medish versus Neal. It was Euros Medic.
Yeah.
And then I heard Medish, and I was like, I'll just go with that.
Sounds good. So I looked at Medish's record leading up to this fight, and as impressive his record was, he wasn't really fighting anyone that notable. And I kind of have this idea of like, if you have a padded record, if you have like a bunch of good wins against people that no one's ever heard of and organizations no one's ever heard of, and you have no wins against anybody ranked, you're going against a veteran, I'm usually going to side with the veteran. And that's what I did here. And so I had Jeff Neal. I thought he was going to win this fight, and it ended up being 1 minute, 19 seconds, a disgusting KO. I'm talking made Jeff Neal go stiff. Almost looked like he was dead. Whew. So I got a question here. I hate to ask this question, but I have to ask it. Roy, do you think it is time for Jeff Neal to retire? The reason why I'm asking, he has 1 and 4. He's 1 and 4 in his last 5. He's 1 and 4 in his last 5, and 3 of those 4 losses were by finish. 2 of those by knockout. And this was a very ugly knockout to watch. He's been in a lot of wars. He has a lot of fights behind him. Is it time to hang up the gloves?
Yeah, because Pradas knocked him out pretty solid too. And you got to start wondering about CTE whenever you take knockouts like what he has.
Yeah, it was brutal. Yeah, that's when he got knocked out.
I wasn't really surprised with this one. I had Medish as my pick, but this was his 4th first-round finish in a row. He hasn't been beaten since 2021, and he has no decisions going back that far.
Yeah, you mentioned the Pradas knockout as well. That's the one where it was the last-second spinning KO or spinning elbow KO.
Yeah,
that just, oh man. It's 2 in a row where it's a bad knock. It's one thing to get TKO'd or, caught or whatever, but like both of these knockouts, like the dude looked dead. And
yeah,
he's had, let's see how many fights he's had total. I mean, he's only had 24 fights. It doesn't sound like a ton, but I mean, he's been fighting since 2012. I don't know. I think it's close to time to wrap it up.
Yeah, I think that he's had a good run. It's over now. He's at that 30 or that 66% rate winning. He may as well resign that. He's not going to be anything but a gatekeeper and protect his brain before worse happens to it.
Well, at this point, I don't even know if you could consider him a gatekeeper because he was ranked number 12. And if he lost this bad to someone who's unranked, it wouldn't surprise me if he, instead of just falling one spot, he could fall out the rankings entirely. And if that's the case, he's not going to be gatekeeping anything. And
well, don't underestimate Medish because while he hasn't fought the biggest names, he has been winning in spectacular fashion.
Right, and that's actually what I was going to ask next. So what is going to be next for Medish? Because he's unranked currently. Again, the rankings haven't been updated, so I imagine he will be in the rankings once they do update it. But going into the fight, he was unranked. He beat Jeff Neal, who was ranked at the time number 12. So if he just beat number 12, what do you think's next for him? I have the rankings up here.
Well, obviously we've got to put him up against Jack Delta Mautalama.
who's currently still number 1 ranked. I
No,
mean,
in all seriousness, I think that the next one for him is probably either Gilbert Burns or Colby Covington.
Colby Covington needs to fall off the rankings as well. He might, because he's ranked, it says 14, but he's tied for 14 with Michael Page. In my mind, he should be, if he is ranked 15. So, unless they completely remove Jeff Neal and move Medish up, unless it plays out like that, Colby Covington can fall out the rankings entirely. You have Page, Rodriguez, Burns, Bonfim. These are all like the 10 plus. I think in those fights would be pretty good. Guess we'll see what happens. All right, now we go ahead and move on to the next fight. Another one that
Ige versus Costa.
This one did not. Another one that did not play out.
Finish a fight.
Another one that just did not play out the way that I thought. So I thought this would be one of the fights to get Danny Ige back on track, because he's been kind of like win lose. And I thought it was time for him to get another win again against another guy who has wins, but against non-notable opponents. But man, Melquizael, we were wondering how to pronounce that last week. We're like Melquizael, and it was like Melquizael is how they announced it live. Costa, towards the end of the first round, finishes Dan Ige. Get this, it's the very first time Dan Ige has been finished in his entire career.
Man, those kicks were just nasty. The whole round.
The whole round.
Every kick.
4 minutes. I mean, it almost went the full 5 minutes. It was officially stopped at 4 minutes, 56 seconds. So you can say we got basically one full round of Costa in action, and it was impressive to see. I do think we have some potential star power behind this guy. So I'm ready to see what happens next with Melquizael Costa. And that is a big feather in your cap to say you're the very first person to finish Danny Ige. Danny Ige's been a lot of wars, but no one's been able to finish him. I mean, he had that, last minute fight against Diego Lopez, and Diego Lopez is a killer who finishes everybody that he beats just about. He rarely goes to decision, and Danny Ige was able to make it to a decision even with him. Costa had other plans. He said, I don't get paid by the hour. I'm getting this dude out, and I'm going home without any scratches on me. So he's unranked, and he just beat Dan Ige, who I believe is also unranked. Let me confirm that. I think he used to be ranked. No, I'm sorry, he's ranked number 14. So he's in the bottom of the rankings. So when they update these rankings lists, I assume this is going to push. It would make sense for Costa to be pushed up into the bottom of the top 15 rankings. So I guess we should start seeing him move up and fight some other people ranked in the bottom of the top 15. I see some pretty good fights here. Ortega, Emmett, Pitbull. I think any of those would be good.
Yeah, I agree with you. He's definitely got the potential for some real star power with the kicks, the way that he's got them, or the way that he's landing them. And he does the multicolored hair thing, which always helps with the star power. Just ask Sugar Sean.
That kind of bugged me. I actually said going into that fight, when I saw how goofy his hair looked, I said, I want him just to lose because of how dumb his hair looks. But he didn't care. He didn't care what my opinions were on his hair. He said, I'm going to knock this dude out.
Yeah, and a spinning back kick to the chin is a way to make a statement when you enter the top 15.
Oh, absolutely. That was a very good win, and I think we're going to see another good fun fight from him in the near future. Now, moving right along to another really fun fight. We all know you just love the heavyweight division, so I want you to go ahead and talk as much as you can about Sergey Spivak versus, we've been saying for months now, Andy Delija. It just looks right, Andy Delija. I never really paid attention to how they pronounce his name. It's Ante Delia.
Yes. And Ante Delia is a teammate of Tom Aspinall, and you can tell that he spends a lot of time sparring with Tom because of the way that he maximized his 1 and 2 over and over again. He just couldn't find a target consistently with Spivak. Spivak went out there, controlled pace, controlled range, landed when he needed to, but this is the first heavyweight fight we've had in ages that went back and forth and was a good brawl.
It was a
The
great
only
fight.
thing that was missing from it was the heavy-handed KO, but I'm willing to give that up to see two guys this size go at it for 15 minutes solid and not gas.
I would rather a fun 3-round decision than a sloppy, pathetic looking fight that one guy just happens to land a KO at some point.
Well, the thing is, with two guys that landed as many times as each of these guys did, not to have the knockout power at this level, it implies that they're at the end of their rope. They're not going to climb very much further up the ladder trying for punches and bunches. Because they lack the one-punch knockout power that all the other competitors, even the fat guys, have up there.
Yeah, so this really was the best heavyweight fight we've had in quite a while. One thing that really confused me about this one, though, so it did go to decision, and I had it 29-28. Ended up being
Me too.
So two of the judges also agree with us 29-28, but one of them had it 30-27.
How do you give round 2 to Spivak? I don't get that.
Me neither. I really don't get it either, because that round, it was very clear. It wasn't like one of those, it's a close one, I kind of give it to Delia. No. It was like Delia landed more. He did more damage. He actually got some, I guess you could call it grappling, not like takedowns, but he had like cage control, like pressing him up against the cage, dirty boxing. He controlled that round. It was a clear 10-9 round for Delia. So when I heard 30-27, I was very confused at that one. I know a lot of times we're going to disagree on scoring. We talk about this almost every single event about some scoring that we don't agree with. And this is one that really stuck out. There's another one that's we're also going to talk about on the scoring, but at the end of the day, I guess it doesn't matter because the same guy won regardless. So it didn't really end in any kind of controversial way, but I was still really confused with that. And I really want to talk about that. You know, in what world does this judge think that Spivak won round 2? Sure, he won rounds 1 and 3 and should win, but you know, I worry. I have to call it out. I always worry whenever I see scoring that's that bad because it could have drastic effects for other fighters in the future. And you might see a championship win or loss off of a really bad decision. You know, I mentioned before the DDP versus Sean Strickland one where I think that Strickland should have won that first one. And that's actually one where I thought the rounds were really close. So I wasn't really that mad about it. It's like, okay, I think Sean should have won, but I'm not going to scream from the top of the rooftops that he was robbed because I at least recognize that they were close rounds. This was not a close round. So if this judge, whoever he is, and actually I could tell you who it was, I'll pull it up real quick. Whoever this judge is could do damage to the sport if it continues judging in this manner. And so I think it needs to be called out, and I'm going to continue calling it out.
This is why Dana White has long said, don't leave it in the hands of the judges. Whether you have one-punch knockout power or you need punches and bunches to get it done, the sense of urgency for both these guys needs to be there to finish fights going forward if they ever want to climb the ranks.
Correct. So for the record, this judge is Jeff Rexroad, Rexroad. Rexroad, Rexroad. Jeff Rexroad. See, I always think of like Mike Bell as a name that you hear a whole lot judging that sometimes gives really goofy scores. I don't see Mike Bell on this one. I haven't looked at every single. Looks like Chris Lieben did some scoring on here. No, I'm sorry, Chris Lee, not Chris Lieben. Chris Lieben is a judge, by the way, now in the MMA world, but not on this event. But yeah, Jeff Rexroad, if you're listening, and I know you're not, but if you're listening, you know him, tell him that we said he is a completely awful judge and needs to not do any more judging. And now that I have his name, I'm going to see if his name is in the other fight that we're going to talk about in a little bit, because there's another controversial decision that we'll talk about. Actually, no, he wasn't one of the judges, but we'll get to that one in a little bit.
Before we go there, we've got to talk about Jacoby Smith versus Josiah Harrell.
Yeah, that's where we're going to go next. Oh, my God.
Two guys headed into the octagon with undefeated records, almost the exact same record going into this. 10-0 versus 11-0. And that one extra fight really made the difference because Jacoby Smith ended this at 3 minutes in round one with some vicious ground and pound.
Did you like hack into my computer and read the notes that I have here? Because I have literally typed out right here, vicious ground and pound KO. Like,
you know what they say, great minds think alike, but so do defective ones. That's what psychology is about.
Yeah, very true. This was vicious ground and pound KO. Oh my God. So first off, we got to talk about Jacoby Smith. His wrestling, we talked about it last week. Jacoby Smith has really good college wrestling in his arsenal, but actually so does Josiah Harrell. A lot of people, I think, overlook that. Harrell has really good grappling as well, but in this case, Jacoby Smith looked like the better wrestler. There was some really good wrestling exchanges. It was a pretty violent match for short as it was. It was pretty violent. There was some back and forth. Smith was able to get Harrell down a few times. Harrell was able to get back up. At one point, Harrell shot a really nice takedown, and it looked like Harrell was about to turn it around to his favor. But as soon as Smith's back hit the mat, he did like this kind of back roll to where he just ended up landing in top position, and that's actually what led to the finish. And so he ended up pinning his arm where Josiah Harrell was at his mercy. Then he just starts punching him really, really hard in the side of the head. The dude goes limp, and the ref does not jump in very quickly. And
the ref was sitting there checking his watch, trying to use the sundial feature with paying no attention to Harrell's safety.
This was a really bad late stoppage, and a lot of people online are very, very mad at this referee.
If that ref was any later, he'd have to take a pregnancy test.
Yeah, you're not wrong there, man. I'm trying to actually look up the name of the ref. I don't have it on this site here, but that ref needs to never ref again. This was a egregious late stoppage. It was almost as bad as a Dan Miragliotta fight. And
when you see that somebody's arms are pinned and they go limp, you got to protect them at that point. You don't let another 10 strikes go through.
Right. So a lot of people really mad at this referee, but there's also some people mad at Jacoby Smith for two different reasons. So I don't necessarily agree with this entirely, but I don't know. I'll get your take on it. Let me first tell you what their takes are. So some people are saying that when he saw Harrell was out, he should have just went and stopped punching on his own. I'm iffy on that.
As a prize fighter, you're taught not to stop until the ref interrupts you.
See, I'm a little bit iffy on that because on one hand, I agree with everything you just said. I would just repeat what you said there. But I do admit that whenever fighter shows that restraint anyway, I do find it very admirable. There's been a lot of fights we've seen before where a dude lands a knockout blow and he's ready to jump on. The ref it's not even that the ref's being late. It's just like the ref has not had a chance to run in real quick. And you see the dude could land another punch and he shows that restraint when he does. I respect it a bit more, but I'm not saying that you are beholden to do that. When these guys get in the cage, they know the risks that they're putting themselves in. Some other people are also arguing that Jacoby Smith continued punching even after the ref grabbed him, started to push him off. He still snuck in two more. And so they're saying that was kind of a dirt move for him to do that. Part of me thinks maybe he's just in the moment and he's just going all out. So I don't know, but some people are saying that he also has a history of this. I have not seen his older fights, so I can't confirm this. But I've seen several people comment that in a few of his other previous fights, he will continue punching even after the ref is shoving you off of him. He sneaks in a couple more. So maybe he has a history of this. I don't know. I'm not going to get out the torches just yet on this guy, but I will at least point out the narrative surrounding this finish and what people are saying about it. And I guess we'll keep an eye on it to see if he continues sneaking in extra punches after the ref tries to shove him off. So what's your take on the finish, the late stoppage, and all that?
I didn't say anything wrong with how Smith fought. I think that he was in the moment from the time that Harrell went limp to the time that Smith quit punching and the ref intervened I don't see where it was his responsibility to understand that Harrell was was unconscious. That's the ref. And I didn't actually notice Smith taking extra shots after the ref stopped him. But if he did, that's something he may have to clean up. But you don't really expect people to have that kind of awareness when they're unranked. They're still in the moment. They're still climbing. They're still learning. Let's not break out the torches and the pitchforks until he gets in the rankings, and we can really see if he's a dirty fighter or if it was just something that's a learning experience for him. Now, who do you think that they should sacrifice to the undefeated next?
So, first of all, everything you just said, every word of it, I actually agree with you 100% about the stoppage. And, you know, it could be just adrenaline. He's in the moment. Like, you're getting pushed, but you're just like, you're still going like, oh, okay, it's done, you know. So I agree with you on all those points. Now, what's next for him? So this is an unranked guy who just fought another unranked guy. So this isn't really necessarily pushing into the rankings. And the welterweight division is very deep. So it's hard to say.
Michael Venom is number 14, if you can believe that.
Oh, yeah, it makes sense when you look at how stacked the division is. So I don't see, because it's not public, you know, I don't see what it looks like outside of the 15. I don't see how they're ranking people. So I don't know what kind of queue they have trying to get into the rankings. So at this moment, I can't really say who should be next for him. But if they are trying to push him into the rankings, if they think that this win was good enough and Harold they thought was good enough that the winner of this could look at fighting someone ranked next, well, these are welterweights, and the welterweight division is pretty stacked. You're going to have to, of course, start him towards the bottom. We already mentioned the guy who beat Jeff Neal. He's going to be bouncing up into the rankings. Actually, you know what? That would be a really good one, because you got a guy who won against Jeff Neal in the welterweight division who was unranked but will be ranked once these rankings update. Maybe put him against Melquizael Costa. If not him, currently still ranked. If he's still ranked when this is all said and done, you got Covington, Daniel Rodriguez, Michael Venom Page. I don't think Jeff Neal. I don't want to see Jeff Neal go against another knockout artist at this point. I would like to see him be able to speak to his grandchildren when he's older. So I say let's have these two guys that were on this card, since you know they both had good performances. They're going to have roughly the same amount of layoff. I think that should be the next fight. Melquizael should be ranked after this is all said and done. And then this guy, Jacoby Smith, is going to want to get into the rankings. And I think that would be a good entry fight into trying to get into the rankings. Fight someone else who just worked their way into the rankings. That's what I think.
I agree. They would have the exact same amount of downtime. Costa is a featherweight. I think you're thinking of Medish.
I'm sorry. Yeah. I said the wrong name. I was thinking of the guy who knocked out Dan Ige. Yes. Thank you for the correction. Medish. The guy who just beat Jeff Neal.
But yeah, still what I was saying goes. They'd have the same amount of downtime. They're both at the point where they're looking to break into the rankings. I think, and it would be a good stylistic fight.
Yeah, I think it would be. And like I said, after these rankings update, considering that Medish just beat the number 12 ranked, he should be in the rankings, albeit at the bottom of the rankings. So yeah, I say let's do Jacoby Smith versus Medish. Let's see if they make that fight happen. I've predicted a few times. I said this is the fight to make, and then sure enough, later on it gets announced. So sometimes I think maybe certain people are listening to us and they're actually taking my advice. That would be pretty cool if that's the case.
Now, you know that I was actually pulling for Harrell on this fight because of his nickname.
The Muscle Hamster.
Muscle Hamster.
That is a crazy name. They actually mentioned that, I think it was John Anik said that he got the nickname from when he was playing football. I don't know if it was like high school or college or whatever, but he played football and his nickname was the Muscle Hamster.
Yep. Well, that brings us to the last one of the card. Zachary Reese versus Mikel Pereira.
So this fight, I think we're going to be talking more on than any other fight that we've discussed on this card, with the exception of the main event, because there's a whole lot that happened in this fight that needs to be broken down. A whole lot. So for starters, let's go ahead and address the elephant in the room. Just about everybody is calling this a robbery. I'm pretty sure you disagree, and we're going to get to that. But most people had this 29-28, and it ended up being a split decision with Pereira winning by 2 judges 29-28, and the third judge had it 29-28 for Reese instead. And all the talk online is that this was one of the worst robberies they've ever seen. I think I understand. I agree that Zachary Reese should have won this fight, but I think I know why the judges scored the way they did, even if I don't 100% agree with it. I know you have some different ways of scoring it. So before I get into my take on that, I want you to tell me and tell our audience how you thought the fight went down, how you thought it should have been scored, and how it played out.
So there's always one token fight of the card where someone has to push the fouls to the limit, to the point where I feel the need to address it in the pound cast.
I was going to talk about that. I have very detailed notes on these fouls, but continue.
Well, go ahead, because my thoughts on it is that's what cost Reese the fight.
Well, it shouldn't have. Well, if you mean it cost him the fight by affecting his performance. No, he was the one who was landing the fouls. That's right. So,
yeah.
So
I
there
think
were
the judges took it upon themselves in a close decision to use the fouls as a reason not to give it to Reese.
That's an interesting take, and we've talked about this. If the referees don't take action, should the judge take action? I'm not sure I want to go down that road, but now that you mentioned that, it kind of makes me wonder if that is what happened. Very interesting.
I got to give it to Pereira. He played it smart, because without the fouls, he definitely would have gassed and lost this fight. He used the time from the fouls to recover and get his gas tank back up a little bit instead of running dry. And it was obvious that he was starting to run dry and needed those breaks.
I'm not sure I fully agree with that. So basically, let's go ahead and talk about the fouls individually. So there were 2 fouls in round 1. They were both low blows from Reese onto Pereira. But in that first round, and even by all judges' scorecards and pretty much everybody that talked about this fight, we all agree that Pereira won that first round. So that's when the first 2 fouls happened, both of them low blows, and it was obviously not intentional. It's, those upper inside thigh kicks that are actually pretty effective strikes. But sometimes you move at a weird angle and it catches. Now, here's where it gets a little weird here. So some people are saying that, he was using that as an excuse to recompose himself. But the thing was, he was winning that round. So I don't think it would have made sense for him to fake it and milk it for any kind of benefit, because he was already doing well. Whenever they did the replays, a lot of people were saying that didn't look like a low blow. That looked like it hit high. Like it was kind of close, but not exactly a low blow. I don't know. It's kind of hard to tell, even in slow motion, because the angle and sometimes like it might not look like it hits, but if you actually hit high enough where like the top of the belt and the cup, like you could catch the top of the cup and pull the cup up, and it has the same effect of a bit of a low blow. So I'm not really too sure, but a lot of people online are saying that Pereira was faking both those low blows so he could recompose himself in the first round. And then the second round ended up being an eye poke. And Herb Dean was the ref. And again, you had a warning for the first low blow, a warning for the second low blow, a warning for the eye poke. No points were ever taken away at any point. And I also saw people saying the same thing, that he was faking the eye poke. But the second round's the most interesting round. We're going to get to how it all played out in a minute, but the eye poke to me looked legitimate. So I think a lot of people were just mad at the kind of iffy low blows in the first round, that it made people already think that he was faking fouls in general. So whenever the eye poke happened in the second round, they're like, oh, he's faking again. But when they show on the replay, that looked like a legitimate eye poke to me. He didn't spend a ton of time he didn't take like the full 5 minutes or whatever. He just, took like less than a minute, kind of blinked it out and went back to it.
Took enough time to catch his breath.
Right.
That's all I'm saying is he used the fouls to catch his breath.
Right. And then the third round, nothing too controversial there. And it looked to me like Reese had won that round. So the big question is the second round. So if you look at the judges' scores, if you look at my scores and the one judge that scored it for Zach Reese, it was the same. You have Pereira taking round 1, Reese taking rounds 2 and 3. But the two judges who gave it to Pereira gave him round 2. So round 2 is the contested round. And I think I know why. Now, you have this theory about the fouls and the judges taking matters in their own hands since Herb Dean didn't do his job like he should have. But another way you could look at it is that second round was a bit of a weird one to judge because what is more important, doing more damage or just having more time where you're in charge of the round? And I know that it's kind of a gray area at times. It kind of depends. You can't just choose one or the other by default. You got to kind of play things out. And the second round was an interesting round because in most of the exchanges, Reese is getting the better of him. Reese was landing a good bit more on the final strikes landed at the end of the round. He landed a lot more. He was controlling the pace. He was sticking and moving. He got the better of most of the exchanges. That being said, Pereira, when he did landed a lot more flush. And Reese was pretty bloody at the end of round 2. He took a lot of damage, at least from a visual perspective. He had a pretty busted up nose. So how would you score it? Do you give it to the guy who did more damage because of the bloody nose, or do you give it to the guy who was kind of controlling it as a whole, just from a sticking and move and pacing standpoint? So I think that is why the round 2 was the one that was where people differed on. What do you think?
Yeah, you're always going to have that argument between control versus damage. And there is no right answer to that. It goes situation by situation because sometimes that control, it comes with damage, and sometimes that damage comes with control. And there's never going to be a blatant right answer. The one right answer that we can take away from this fight is if you win an MMA match, if you are good enough to do that and you jump up on top of the fence, don't pull out your cup and throw it into the audience.
Yeah, what was that about? What was that about? That was gross.
That's nasty.
That is nasty. But another thing you got to keep in mind when it comes to the visuals, I have to mention that a few times that it looked like he did more damage visually. Sometimes it might look like you've done more damage, but you actually haven't. So, because you get
that
catch
was
someone.
The case with Gane and Aspinall. Y'all were all like, but his nose was bleeding.
That's only because
damage.
That's because Aspinall didn't really do as much in return. He didn't land more strikes either, but that's another rabbit hole to go down. In the case with this one, it's like, yeah, his nose is bloody, but it also looked like it might have been broken. So I think it was legitimate damage. Like with the Aspinall thing, even if you look at the strikes landed and who was controlling the pace, I still had gone up on that point. Even without the bloody nose, I would have given him that round. But again, that's another argument to be had. This is a little bit of a different one because it looked like Reese's nose was actually broken at the end of round 2. But he still landed a good bit more and had more dominance in the exchanges. It was more like a few good flurries that Pereira had, and in those few flurries, he landed a good bit of damage, but that's like all he had in round 2. So that's why I gave it to Reese, but I think that's why two of the judges gave it to Pereira. I don't agree with it, but that's what I think.
Yeah, when it came down to it, I think that I had it for Pereira. I don't remember exactly, but it could have gone either way. The judges had a tough job in this one.
Yeah, well, I do remember because we're talking about that. You said you gave Pereira round 3 because of the grappling exchange at the end of the third round, and actually,
that's right.
Yeah, and I actually want to address that on why I disagree, respectfully disagree, because yes, technically, Pereira Pereira did sort of get a takedown, but he wasn't able to secure it. Like, he initiated the exchange that resulted in Reese falling backwards, so you could kind of call it a takedown. But Reese was able to quickly turn that around and get into a top position, and was able to get a secure spot from there, and then start to sink in a front headlock choke of some type. So, as someone who trains in jiu-jitsu and competes in jiu-jitsu, I understand that scoring in jiu-jitsu is not the same as scoring in MMA, but it is still something that you kind of use as a bit of a guide when it comes to little exchanges like that. If I shoot for a takedown on you and I can't fully get you secured, like, yes, I knocked you back, got you to your butt, but if you could quickly sweep me, get into a top position, and then start to get a choke hold on me, even if I get out of that, you will be awarded the takedown points, not me, because I'm able to land into the top position. And on top of that, because you go for a choke on me, even though I was able to fend off the technique, the fact that you started to attack a submission gives you what's called an advantage point. So you would get the points on the takedown, you would get an advantage point for the submission attack. So in that little exchange, it actually benefited Reese more than it benefited Pereira. So that's basically it on the main card. I didn't really pay attention to the prelims, but we do at least want to say that our local fighter, Carly Judice, was able to win in the opening fight of that night. Fun fact, she's also the opening fight when I was in New Orleans. I got to see the retirement fight for Dustin Poirier. She was also the opening fight there. She has won both those fights, so we'll be keeping an eye on her as she works her way up the UFC rankings. Carly Judice, also known as Crispy. Have you looked at next week's fight card at all?
No, I haven't even given it a glance yet. Let's see what we got here. Moreno versus Kavanaugh.
Yeah, what is this? Loner?
Lone Air?
Loneer? It's Lone apostrophe ER. It's probably like Loneer or something like that, but we're gonna just call him Loner. So I broke down this card. I looked at all the fighters and looked at their records and all that kind of stuff. And I don't want to spend a ton of time breaking down all this because it's just a fight night. It's not a numbered event. But I at least have some notes on all these on who I think might win or lose based off a little bit of information I can find on these people. So you have former champion Brandon Moreno. Fun fact, the very first Mexican-born UFC champion in UFC history, going against Loner Kavanaugh. And I have Moreno winning against Kavanaugh. So kind of like we've said this before, where a person has a really good record, but they face a bunch of nobodies and they're going against a veteran, I typically side with the veteran. And although that did not play out well with me, this card from this past weekend, because it didn't work out well for the veterans, I'm going to stick with that narrative, and I think it's going to pay off better this time because when I look at Loner Kavanaugh's record, he is 9-1. He has all of his wins are against absolute nobodies, nobody's ever heard of. And then whenever he finally does fight somebody who I have heard of, that is Charles Johnson, he loses by knockout. He is coming off of a loss, that one fight that he lost. So he won 9 in a row, then he makes the UFC, fights his first named opponent, and loses by knockout in the first round. And now he's fighting former champion Brandon Moreno. So I'm going Moreno on this one.
I wonder what Leonard's got on Dana to fast track him up to Moreno after a loss like that.
I know. Moreno, who is still ranked very high in the flyweight division and a former champion. That seems kind of weird. It really does seem a little weird to me. Yeah, I don't know. I've seen some weird matchmaking. I think the Paramount era has been overall better in the matchmaking than we've seen in the past, but there's still a few weird ones, and this is another weird one. I don't understand. You know, when I look at his record here, so he won in his Dana White Contender Series fight, and then he did win 2 fights after that, but they're against unranked people. And then when he finally fights someone, Charles Johnson, who actually I don't even think is ranked either. Maybe he used to be ranked. Let me double check that. So that's flyweight. Charles Johnson is ranked, but he's ranked 13th. He loses to number 13, Charles Johnson, by knockout. And his next fight is number 6 ranked former champion Brandon Moreno. I don't get that. I'm going Moreno. So, all right, moving on to the next fight here. Marlon Vera versus David Martinez. I have Martinez winning this one. So Martinez is 13-1, and he's a hungry up-and-comer. He's on a 9-fight win streak. Again, it's another one of these situations of the veteran versus the up-and-comer guy who has faced a lot of not as notable opponents. But I'm seeing a lot more promise in Martinez than some of these other people. He has fought, Rob Font. He's coming off of a win against Rob Font and won by unanimous decision. And then all of his other wins have been really impressive. He has 10 of his wins by knockout, 10 of his 13 wins by knockout. And he's on a pretty good winning streak. So I actually think that Marlon Vera, said that right the first time, is kind of in that gatekeeper status. And I think this is a guy that's going to bust through those gatekeeper doors. Stop me anytime if you want to interject your thoughts on any of these fighters.
Nope, you're doing a good job. Yeah.
just keep on going.
Just keep going. The only one that I really have an opinion on is the next one, King Green against Daniel Zellhuber.
Well, then you go ahead. Go ahead and tell me your thoughts on this one.
All right. So last time that I saw King Green, he was getting whooped by Paddy Pimblett.
Right.
Who, there's no shame in that. Paddy went on to fight for the interim title for a reason. But Zellhuber looks like he's a little bit of a different animal. This guy's got a 40% striking accuracy with 25% takedown success.
Yeah, fair.
Like, that's ridiculous. Out of his significant strikes, he lands 63% of the strikes that he goes to the head. That's impressive. He only lands 10% of his leg kicks, which kind of leg strikes, which kind of balances out the number. But I think that he's going to go in there and punish King Green and keep it on the feet.
All right, so I actually have Bobby Green in this one, and the reason for that is both of them haven't looked super impressive lately based off of what I've seen from their overall win-loss record and who they faced. I don't see like a bright future champion level, career for either of these guys. But whenever I look at who they fought and how well they fought against this competition, Zellhuber is 3 wins and 3 losses in his last 6 fights. He is on a 2-fight losing streak, and some of the people he's losing to are not very notable people. While Bobby Green is also, 3-3 or 4-3 in his last 7, if you want to go that far back. But the people he's lost to are Jalen Turner, Paddy Pimblett, Mauricio Hufi. These are much better fighters. So when you have 2 guys that are similar when it comes to win-losses lately, but one of them is losing to much better competition, it's going to make me lean more towards that fighter. So for that reason, I have Bobby Green winning this one.
We will have to see next week who got this one right.
Yep. Again, this is not one where I'm not super impressed by either person, so if I'm wrong on that one, it wouldn't be too surprising. Neither have looked very dominant lately. So moving right along, you got Edgar Chairez, Chairez. Chairs. I'm going to go with that one.
Edgar Chairs.
I'm going to go with
against Philip Buns.
Philippe Bunes.
Philip Buns.
So I have Chairs winning this one. It's another fight where neither fighter has looked that impressive lately, but I'm going with Chairs simply because he's coming off a win and Bunes isn't. That's basically all the notes I have on these two. Again, much lower ranked fighters with less fights to talk about. I'm grasping at straws for, how to break down who I think is going to win between the two. Imanol Rodriguez. I was thinking Imavov from earlier. Imanol Rodriguez versus Kevin Borjas. It's probably Borges. I have Rodriguez winning this one. Imanol is undefeated at 6-0, and Borjas is 1-3 in his last 4. I'm going to go with the guy who's undefeated against a guy who has lost 75% of his last 4 fights. Sorry. Santiago Luna, I have beating Angel Pacheco.
How could you do that to us, man? We need people from the U.S. climbing the rankings. You've got to pull for Angel.
Luna's undefeated 7-0, and Pacheco is on a 2-fight losing streak.
It's time for him to get back in the win column. Go USA.
I mean, I don't really think about it from a nationalistic standpoint. I really do want to see more American fighters. I want to see that representation at the title level, but at this lower level, I'm going off of the numbers on who I think is going to win, who's not. And whenever I have a person on a 2-fight losing streak going against someone who's undefeated, I'm leaning towards the undefeated guy. Now, I'm not saying that means he's definitely going to win, because I've seen crazier people, there are crazier outcomes when it comes to undefeated fighters losing against absolute nobodies. But if I'm not mistaken, didn't Michael Johnson beat someone recently who's undefeated? And he's at like barely 50-something% win record.
Huh.
Something like that. I can't remember if it was that particular fight, but we've seen crazier things happen. So that's the main card for next week. Just on paper, not a whole lot of notable names, so it could still be a fun card. Like this card that we watched this week had
the matchmaking since the Paramount. We entered the Paramount era has been so close and so good that I'm willing to take a risk on a bunch of no names that they're evenly matched.
Yeah, it could still be fun fights. You never know. They don't have to be known names to be fun fights.
They don't have to be big names to be fun fights either.
That is true. They don't have to be big names to be boring fights. We've seen plenty of those. So I do have one more bit of news to talk about. And I'm sure there's a lot more we could talk about when it comes to everything that is in the MMA world, because there's actually been a lot of moving parts lately with the upcoming White House card and a lot of the title picture changes and the new Paramount era. There's actually a lot of stuff that's going on. We could turn this episode into a 3-hour-long episode if we wanted to talk about every little bit of news that we could find, because there's been a ton lately. But I really wanted to talk about it. If nothing else, we need to talk about this, because I think it's probably the most relevant news, or at least the most exciting news when it comes to our team, the Ground and Pound cast, that is. And that is Alex Pereira. We definitely followed this guy's career, and there's a lot of talk. We actually alluded to it earlier on this episode. There's been a lot of talk about Alex Pereira has announced that he has already been in talks with UFC, and they already have a booked fight, a fight that is booked, but it's not been announced who it is. So there's been a lot of reports that he is currently 240-something pounds. So obviously he's not fighting at light heavyweight. He must be fighting at heavyweight. But that's not been officially confirmed. Maybe he just has a really big weight cut ahead of him. But there's also rumors that he might be fighting Cyril Gane or John Jones for an interim title because of how long Tom Aspinall is going to be out. There's a whole lot of speculation at this point. All we know is that Alex Pereira himself has come out and said that he already has something lined up. Nothing's been announced. And from there, it's just a ton of speculation. So now it is our turn to give our speculation. What do you think and or hope is next for Alex Pereira?
So I don't even know where to go with this. The truth is, I would love to see Pereira versus Gane, but I have problems with Gane being rewarded for poking Tom in the eye and getting another shot off of it for an interim belt. And then there's the question of Alex versus Jones. But I don't think that after the way Jones treated the heavyweight belt last time he had it, that he should ever be allowed near a belt again, especially now that he's talking about having hip trouble and he's not going to commit to defend a strap if he does get it. And I would hate to see Tom sit for another year waiting for John to get back on the horse again. And then question of Ulberg. I mean, Ulberg versus Pereira would be an amazing fight. I think I would rather see Ulberg fight Pereira, and we get for the heavyweight. There's going to be an interim. There's just no way to get around that. But I don't think Surreal should have a shot at it. I say Cortez Acosta's on a tear recently. Let him fight Volkov for the interim and have Gane sit out until Tom comes back, unifies, and then if Tom's still holding the strap, let Surreal have a shot then.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. I've talked about it for months now that I really had this, dream match idea about Carlos Ulberg versus Alex Pereira, but it looks like we're not going to be getting that one because now they're talking about Ulberg versus Yuri instead. So, yeah, it looks like we are going into the heavyweight era for Alex Pereira. I guess Aspinall's still going to be sitting on the shelf for a little while he fixes his eye thing. And yeah, it is kind of a messy situation because you know that the UFC, just because they're all into the ratings and the views and the money making, that as much as we would prefer someone like Waldo or someone like that fighting him instead, that's not what we're going to get. We're probably going to get either John Jones or Cyril Gane, whether we like it or not.
If I have to choose between them, Cyril Gane's the lesser of the two evils. There's just no way I will ever sign off on John Jones getting near a belt again.
I 100% agree with you because, like Gane or not, whether he shouldn't be rewarded for, the eye pokes, at the end of the day, what is the future of the division going to look like if Gane has the title versus if John Jones has the title? We've already seen the John Jones experiment at heavyweight. We saw how that played out. We do not want that again, especially when you still have Aspinall technically champion. We don't want to see a repeat of that. As much as we really, really wanted to see Aspinall versus Jones, it's very clear Jones doesn't want that fight, and it's going to be another mess. We went through, what was it, like a year and a half of the division being held up because of that. If Gane gets the title, the interim title, if he fights and beats Pereira, that is, again, if he even wins that fight. But at least the division we could still see moving if Gane wins. So for that reason alone, I agree with you.
Yeah, and it could work out in the best way for Pereira to fight Gane, because if Pereira wins, Gane doesn't get another shot at the undisputed strap until he builds himself back up. Whereas Pereira could become a triple champion, even if he just gets an interim belt. He still is the first triple champ in history.
Yeah, and that's crazy. And
beat Ilya to it.
Yeah, that's really wild. And then I also wonder, if these fights happen, whether it's Gane, whether it's Jones, whether it's Tom Aspinall down the road, what do you think Alex Pereira, a former middleweight champion, what do you think his odds are at beating these three names?
So Cyril Gane is going to be the most interesting fight out of them because two extremely high-level kickboxers going at it. It interests me in big ways. I don't think that Alex would be able to beat Tom, but I'm a big Tom fan. I think that he may be the best heavyweight that's ever gotten there. He just doesn't have the competition or the luck to show what he's really capable of. It's kind of like the Sean Strickland situation. Tom originally was a grappler who learned how to box and just dominated with boxing for the recent time period. We still have yet to see what his grappling capability really is.
We've seen at least a little bit of it.
Just a little bit, though. He's basically won his last 9 fights by knockout.
I think there was one in there. Yeah, I think there was one in there when he beat Andrei Arlovsky, won by rear naked choke.
Yeah. And then, let's see. The only wild card that we've got is Cortez Acosta, who's been putting people to sleep, but is he really ready to step up at the same level as Cyril Gane, Tom Aspinall, and Alex Pereira, that's yet to be seen.
Tom Aspinall also does have one other submission win recently. His second win against Volkov. Or is that his only win against Volkov? Either way, he fought Volkov back in 2022 and got a straight armbar. Which is like an armbar from like a top different. It's like a different angle.
Ooh, Mr. Fancy Blue Belt knows what an armbar is.
Straight armbar is different. Straight armbar, and actually I remember watching that finish. So it's like if you're, instead of like where you have the arm and you like fall backward, like the arm's between your legs and you do it that way, that's just a regular armbar. Straight armbar would be like, if I'm mounted on top of you, like in side control, and I immobilize your arm and I get it straight, and I do like a Kimura grip, but your arm straight, do like a over under, and then apply pressure that way using just my arms. That's called a straight arm bar. I do that one a good bit. Now, we also didn't talk about, I didn't get your take at least, on the hypothetical fight. What if Pereira fights John Jones?
Pereira fights Jones. That would be an interesting fight. Jones would definitely try to grapple it, but Pereira's anti-grappling might be good enough to keep it on the feet and pick him apart. That is a dream matchup that I would love to see, as long as nobody is fighting for a strap.
And I don't know, with John Jones's distance management, his leg kicks, and his disgusting elbows, even in the striking department, as good as Alex Pereira is, I think that could still be a really, really tough fight for Alex Pereira.
Yeah, but you got to look at John Jones is talking about he needs a hip replacement. I just went through a hip replacement this last year, and I'm telling you, you're not wrestling immediately after that.
I don't know. I guess we've got to first wait and see what the fight actually is, because it hasn't been announced last we checked. So,
yep.
Well,
whatever it is, we need the heavyweight division to start turning forward again. We got a good match finally with Ante and
Sergey Spivak.
Spivak. So let's keep that momentum moving to the future. And they still haven't taken Almeida off the rankings. Wow.
I think these rankings are a bit out of date. I'm not sure the last time they updated them.
Yeah, because they've got Almeida moving down 2 spots. That fool is cut.
Yeah. Completely.
I'm surprised they didn't let him go to light heavyweight. With his finish percentage, it really does solidify that we're in the entertainment era for opportunity as opposed to the best fighters.
Yeah, and it's actually, I'm glad you mentioned the entertainment era, basically, because I meant to do it earlier and I forgot. Apologies to Rick real quick for this. He actually sent me his takeaway from the main event, and I was going to read it off for you fine people, the fans of the Ground and Pound cast. When talking about the main event, he said, "My big takeaway, Strickland versus Chimaev should be next. Imavov is deserving, but the UFC isn't merit-based anymore. So going by the entertainment era, it has to be Strickland over Imavov for the next title shot, especially considering Strickland has already beat Imavov." Now, I'm not necessarily buying into that we're going strictly off of entertainment over merit. I think there's still going to be a balancing act between the two. But I think at the very least, considering that Strickland already has a win against Imavov, the only other person he's lost to lately is Dricus du Plessis. I could see him leapfrogging and it wouldn't be that big of a deal considering he's already beat Imavov. So, that's just my thoughts on top of his thoughts, but I just want to throw that out there real quick. It still is going to be a balancing act because if it's only entertainment value and nothing about merit, then Chris Barnett would have been heavyweight champion. So, well, not really. He would be number one contender because he wouldn't be able to win the title. But the point is there is still going to be some merit that is in play. Now, if we're going to be talking about if Almeida would have stuck around and moved to light heavyweight, how fun, and that's sarcasm, would it have been to see Almeida versus Magomed Ankalaev?
That sounds absolutely miserable. That sounds like the kind of fight where you grab a pillow and curl up and take a nap until it's over.
Yeah. Well, anyway, that's all I got on any new relevant UFC news, the breakdown from this past weekend, our thoughts on next weekend. So is there anything else you want to add, Roy?
Nope. Thank you all for listening to the Ground and Pound cast. We'll be back next week to review another fight night and see if it's great.